Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Justin here, and today I've got the comparison for you between the LG G3 and the Apple iPhone 5S. And from the very start, you should expect many differences you will notice between these two devices. And one thing I want to get out of the way before I move on with this video is that I know the iPhone 5S did come out September of last year, while the LG G3 did come out just July of this year. But of course, when the next generation iPhone 6 comes out in September of this year, I will of course be comparing these two devices once again. So just to get the major specs out of the way, the LG G3 is powered by a quad-core Snapdragon 801 processor clocked in at 2.5 GHz, and the iPhone 5S is powered by a dual-core Apple A7 processor that is 64-bit and clocked in at 1.3 GHz, and also a M7 Motion coprocessor. On the LG G3, it packs in 2 or 3 gigs of RAM depending on your model. Most likely the 3GB model is the one you will be picking up, and the iPhone 5S features 1 gig of RAM. So without further ado, let's start out with the hardware. The iPhone 5S is obviously the much smaller phone here, and both of them have taken different approaches in terms of their design and build. The iPhone 5S is beautifully crafted, as Apple has been very well known for. It is made out of aluminum and it is available in 3 different colors, including a space gray, a champagne gold that we've got here, and a silver. On the other hand, in the past few years, I've really been fantasized by the design of LG devices, especially with the LG G2 and now the LG G3. Obviously, it has a much larger form factor with extremely small bezels and chin, but the back is made out of a metal look plastic build. But despite its plastic build, many of the people who I've showed the device to have actually thought it was metal, and by doing so, it allows the back to be removable but still retain a nice durable design, as it does still feel extremely solid, and I really have no complaints of their choice to go with plastic. When you compare the sizes of these devices, the iPhone 5S comes in at 123.8mm tall, while the LG G3 comes in at 146.3. In terms of width, the LG G3 comes in at 74.6 and the iPhone 5S at 58.6. So it is pretty safe to say that the LG G3 is a significant larger device, and that is to be expected as the display is a full 1.5 inches larger diagonally. Moving on to the thickness and weight, the iPhone 5S comes in at 7.6mm thick, while the LG G3 comes in at 8.9, while the iPhone 5S weighs in at 112 grams and the LG G3 at 149. So looking at the size to weight ratio, I gotta say that both these devices feel very light in the hand. On the bottom of both these devices, you will find your 3.5mm headphone jack, with the iPhone 5S also having your speakers located on the bottom and also your proprietary lightning dock connector for charging and syncing, while the LG G3 of course uses the micro USB. Some other things to note is that the LG G3 does have the buttons located on the back, like we first saw on the LG G2 and also the LG G Flex. This allows the device to be extremely seamless with pretty much nothing going along the side, but it does take a little bit of getting used to at first. One of the more prominent features we have seen on the iPhone 5S is its Touch ID fingerprint sensor, and it's become something that I've pretty much taken for granted. I use it a lot and I feel that Apple did a very good job executing it. So in terms of the designs, there is already a huge difference between both these devices, both in the look and design as well as the build quality and size approaches taken by both companies. And obviously Apple and LG have both done a very good job in their design, and there are of course advantages and disadvantages to come with both of them. Next up, let's talk about the displays, and not only is there a huge size difference, there's also a pretty big resolution difference. The iPhone 5S has a 4-inch 1136 by 640 resolution display with a PPI of 326. On the LG G3, you've got a much larger 5.5-inch Quad HD IPS display with a resolution of 2560 by 1440, with an impressive PPI of 538. With that incredible resolution and PPI, you obviously notice an impressive display on the LG G3. Everything kind of just pops out to you, and although on Android, apps or pretty much every app isn't optimized exactly for that Quad HD resolution, it's definitely a great step into the future, as you do expect the market to be moving towards that resolution throughout the next year. But as of now, I'm really enjoying the sharpness seen in the wallpapers, the backgrounds, and viewing photos on the LG G3. On the iPhone 5S, the display PPI of 326 is obviously not really comparable to the 538 on the LG G3. It also has a much smaller display, so that is something to consider. But I will say the display is just fine, and for most people you won't really notice a massive difference between the display of the iPhone 5S and the LG G3. What the LG G3 will offer you is a whole new kind of pop factor, as if the colors and the pictures were just jumping out of the screen. So now we're going to compare the same image on the LG G3 and the iPhone 5S, and I will say that the iPhone 5S is probably one to give you a very natural color representation like we did see on the HTC One M8. On the LG G3, where it's really able to shine is with its very high resolution screen and a very high resolution picture. You are able to view it in all its glory, and I will say that the LG G3 has a little bit of a more saturated color, but it really isn't much at all. You can see the purples just pop out a little bit, but in general I think both of these displays did a very good job representing the color. So now onto the software, and with every comparison between an Android and an Apple device, there is going to be a pretty big difference. Perhaps one of the biggest differences on top of all the other differences we have already seen in this comparison. The iPhone 5S of course running iOS 7 with its iOS 8 update due to come out this fall, and the LG G3 of course running Android 4.4.2 KitKat with the Optimus UI skin. So first we're going to look at the iPhone 5S, and like I mentioned, it is running iOS 7 currently. However, the iOS 8 overhaul is in beta right now and due to come out officially to the public this fall, and I will be comparing that with the LG G3 as the iPhone 6 comes out. So the iPhone of course has always had a very simple layout, and by double tapping on your home button it will take you to your multitasking apps in a card layout, and something introduced in iOS 7 is by sliding up from the bottom it will give you some of your quick toggle utilities and also your quick toggle settings on the top, as well as some music and volume control and your brightness settings. Sliding down the notifications, you have your Today, All, and Miss tabs, and you can see in the Today tab they just give you some of your news, and your All will just show all of your notifications, and by sliding down on your home screen it will take you to your Spotlight search. By turning off your device, the lock screen is obviously very simple. Your notifications will be displayed on that, and that is something that iPhone users have been used to if you have been using iPhone for quite a long time. You can also quickly access your camera from the home screen, and Touch ID on the iPhone 5S is something that I use every single time I turn on the device. The settings in general are very simple, and the iPhone I would say just gives you a what you see is what you get. The kind of customizability isn't to a huge degree. You can pretty much just move around your apps, change your backgrounds, but that is pretty much it. And in terms of the visual layout and what they have done to iOS 7, I gotta say it was a great update and something that I think should have come even earlier. And just going through the settings now, you can see there's the brightness and wallpapers, as well as your sound, Touch ID settings, and in general it is a phone that is very easy for everybody to kind of get used to and navigate very quickly, while I feel Android does have a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning. So I think it's pretty safe to say that iOS brings a kind of simpler experience. I'm sure everybody can agree with that, at least most of us, and that it should be based on a personal decision as to whether you should go with iOS and Android. So now shifting over to the LG G3, it is running Android 4.4.2 KitKat and the LG Optimus UI, and I gotta say on the LG G2 the software simply sucked. And this year they have definitely cleaned it up quite a bit, and I think that they have actually done a pretty good job. Looking at the app drawer, it is pretty typical, and it kind of looks like the typical iPhone home screen in this layout, and you also have your widgets located there, and also your quick search is on the top right corner. There it is, and I also want to note that the keyboard on the LG G3 is great. Compared to other Android keyboards on the market, I actually really like it. So heading back to our home screen, by holding on the home button, it will take you to Google Now, and by kind of sliding it upwards, it will either allow you to go to Google Now from anywhere, also add a quick note through Quick Memo Plus, and the back button of course is located on the right side, and also your menu to show up all of your apps and close them all at once. You can also shift around the orientation and color of the on-screen buttons. When it comes to customizability, as you know, Android does give you quite a bit of customizability. Obviously, you could change your background, you can add your apps to your home screen, that is pretty typical, but you can also drag your widgets and kind of personalize it to what you may like. Sliding down our notifications tab, it also has quite a bit of quick toggle settings located along the top, and you can also have your Q slide applications. Personally, I have that turned off as I really never use that. You also have your brightness sliders and also volume control, and I actually think they've done a very good job in terms of the notification tab, as that was one of the things I really didn't like on the LG G2, and although it is pretty similar, I found that they did kind of get certain things out of the way. You also have the ability to move the apps on the quick toggle settings around depending on which ones you do use most. looking at the settings, what I noticed in the LG skin this time around is that the icons actually look much better, and it kind of complements the QHD display. And I think they have a nice flat look, as it seems like that's what the feature is going towards, like we saw with iOS 7 and also now macOS 10 Yosemite, going towards a flatter approach. And visually, I definitely give LG a thumbs up in this LG Optimus UI this time. So that was pretty much a quick look at the LG Optimus UI on the LG G3. So once again, I gotta say that the biggest decision between these two devices should be based on the software. So now moving on to a very exciting part of this comparison. As you know, cameras are a very important part of everyone's daily life, and the fact that it is built into the smartphone more often than not means that you're probably going to use it most. As people like to say, the best camera is the one you have with you. And I will tell you that both of these cameras do have a lot to offer. On the LG G3, you do have a 13 megapixel rear facing camera and a 2.1 megapixel front facing camera, as well as its laser autofocus technology, which is something that I really loved in about the week I've had this device. It also has the capability of recording 4K video, which a lot of phones are going towards now, and also optical image stabilization. On the iPhone 5S, you have an 8 megapixel rear facing camera and a 1.2 megapixel front facing camera, and Apple has never really been going for the bigger, the better theory, so they did remain with the 8 megapixel camera on the iPhone 5S, but we do expect to see a megapixel jump in the next generation iPhone coming this fall. So first, looking at the interface of the LG G3, and right off the bat, I will tell you that this is one of my favorite interfaces. It has all the features you may need. You have the ability to hide them if you want to just use the screen to monitor what you're taking a picture of or recording, but at the same time, it has all the major features and modes that I would normally use. You have these settings on the top. It allows you to add the grid, change the quality of things of the photo and the video, as you can see here. And there's also the timer and also a really quick selfie mode for taking pictures with the front facing camera. In the video mode, like I mentioned, it does record 4K video, which is very exciting as it seems like many flagship Android devices at least are moving towards 4K video recording capability. There is also the laser autofocus, which works extremely well, and what it does is send lasers to the subject that you're focusing on and kind of dictate the distance and the focus. When it comes to the editing of the photo, it uses the Google app, and it definitely gives you a lot of different options in terms of the auto correct or auto enhance. There's also quite a bit of filters. You can also fine tune the image through its brightness, exposure, stuff like that, rotation, all your typical things. So pretty much all you need is within the photo editing app. So now taking a look at the iPhone 5S, and as you'd expect, it is a very simple interface like the rest of the operating system. In order to move between your modes, you can just slide between them, including the slow motion, video, photo, square photo mode, which I use a ton, and also panorama. On the top, you have the option to have HDR as auto on or off. Same with the flash, switch from the back and the front facing cameras. And on the corner, you also have the option to add different filters, which you can also add after you take the image. But these are just some live filters in case you use them. So after we take the image, we're going to head into the editor, and in there it gives you 5 major features. You can either rotate the image, crop the image, auto enhance it, and use the different filters. Personally, I always use the fade effect for some reason. It really just enhances the image. You also have the red eye and also crop the photo in certain aspect ratios if you would like to. So I think once again, the iPhone doesn't have as many different things you can edit, but it has all I need. So now on to an actual photo comparison, and the iPhone has never really been in the lead in terms of its megapixel count, but it has been known for its great color balance and the way it handles images in different lighting situations. Obviously, with the higher megapixel count on the LG G3, you do have a little bit of a better detail, but I think it's pretty safe to say from these images, although both of them are able to take a great image, in some of them you'll really notice that the iPhone 5S was simply able to handle the colors and, in fact, some of the details a little bit better, but in others, they were pretty close. But I definitely encourage Apple to kind of bump up the megapixel count on the next generation iPhone. When it comes to the video, in this video I recorded the LG G3 in 4K and actually cropped it down to the same size, so it is pretty evident here that you will notice a quality difference in terms of the sharpness between the LG G3 and the iPhone 5S, which is recording in full HD by the way. Once again, I noticed that the iPhone 5S was able to handle some lighting situations in its exposure and kind of balance them a little bit better, as you can see in this fountain image, but the LG G3 definitely still did a very good job, and 4K video recording and the optical image stabilization is definitely a plus for some. And in the last clip here, I would say that they were pretty close in general. However, you will notice that the greens and the dirt is a little bit more vivid in its color on the LG G3 compared to the iPhone 5S. So this has just been a photo and video test comparison between the LG G3 and the iPhone 5S. So a battery is probably one of the most important parts of a smartphone, and without a big battery, you won't be able to use your device for long enough. The iPhones in general haven't been really known for their battery life, as the iPhone 5S has a 1570 mAh battery, while the LG G3 has a 3000 mAh removable battery. And obviously that is part due to the much smaller form factor of the iPhone 5S and its inability to fit a massive battery. The LG G3 has a battery that is nearly 2 times larger on paper. So a larger battery is definitely one of those things that is near the top of everybody's wish list for the iPhone 6, which is rumored to be larger. However, despite the pretty small battery on paper of the iPhone 5S, I'm still able to get a pretty decent amount of time. I'd say about 6 hours on pretty heavy use, as the iPhone 5S has been my daily driver. But obviously 6 hours isn't a full day, and if I'm able to get anywhere about 9 hours comfortably, I'd be very happy with the battery life. On the other hand, the LG G3 absolutely excelled in terms of its battery life. Obviously, with a 3000 mAh battery, that is pretty large and nearly double the size of the battery packed into the iPhone 5S. I was able to get easily a day, if not about halfway into my second day, on moderate use. So without a doubt, anybody should be able to get through a full day on the LG G3 through heavy use, and just plug it in and charge it at night, and you should be good to go for the next day or so. And the fact that it has a removable battery gives you the option to pretty much swap out the battery with a full one anytime during the day in the event that you do run out. So I think no one can argue that the LG G3 in terms of battery life definitely kicks the iPhone 5S. So the last thing we're going to look at is the benchmark comparison, and I really wouldn't think about these too much as there's just so many factors that play into these two devices. The LG G3 did seem to score much lower compared to even other Android devices on the benchmarks for some reason, despite having the same specs. And the iPhone 5S, of course, running a completely different type of processor, being dual core, and also a 64-bit architecture, and also the fact that it runs iOS 7, a completely different operating system as to Android, probably did have a factor either way in its benchmark scores. So in Geekbench, the iPhone 5S on a single core score came out with 1405, while the LG G3 came in at 819, while the LG G3 got 2149 on the multi-core score, and the iPhone 5S came in at 2281. But keep in mind, the LG G3 does have a quad-core processor, while the iPhone 5S has a dual-core processor. When it came to the 3D Mark test, the iPhone 5S came out with a score of 11,427, while the LG G3 came out with a significantly better score of 16,151. But I will tell you that both these devices can play graphic-intensive games no problem. When it came to Antutu, the LG G3 came out on top once again with a score of 30,918, while the iPhone 5S came out with 24,032. And the last test we ran was the SunSpider browser benchmark, and in this test we did use the default browsers on both these devices, which is Safari on the iPhone 5S and the standard LG browser on the LG G3. The lower the score the better, and the iPhone 5S came out with a score of 419.7 milliseconds, while the LG G3 still came out with a great score of 571.9 milliseconds. But I'm just going to say in this test, obviously with very different devices, different operating systems, and so many factors playing in, the benchmark scores really shouldn't mean much as both these devices are able to handle games and everyday tasks no problem. So now it's time to give you guys my final verdict, and there really isn't a definitive answer as to which one is better than the other. There are just too many things to consider and so many things that are different about these two devices, including the screen size, the operating system of course, and you have to head down to the store and really try out both of them to decide which one is better for you. Personally, the iPhone 5S has been my daily driver since the day it came out, and I've been very happy with it despite a few things I'm simply tired of and can't wait until iOS 8 and the iPhone 6. However, it is also worth mentioning that the LG G3 has pretty much been the closest I have been since the HTC One M8 to switching over to Android. But aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to hit a like, as this video did take quite a bit of time to make, and expect many more comparisons to come with the LG G3, and subscribe for some future content, and I'll see you all in the next video.